Anyway, I am really pleased to be talking to you today. It has been a very exciting and fun journey for me to create Stamp Auction Network, and I'm just glad to be able to have this chance to talk to you, and I thank you for that. I'm going to make this interactive by looking at specific stamps, looking at the history. What we call this is 10 insider tips to stamp auctions, and I believe I am an insider. I think what I bring is the insider perspective. And that is because I started collecting stamps at auction and buying at auction in 1988. And I had my computer background. And so I immediately saw a need. And so by 1990, I had contacted a bunch of auction companies and said, I can write an enterprise system for your auction company. I can do everything you need, handling the bids, using database publishing to create your catalogs, doing prices realized after the sale, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I got a number of them to sign up with me. In fact, Shreve's was the fifth company. By the time Siegel came on board, we had 25 companies from all over the world, Harmers of London and Switzerland, Matthew Bennett, the Mannings groups, smaller companies like Michael Rogers, Furby, Gittner, Wolfers before it became Rumsey. And we did some wine auctions. We did sports memorabilia guys. So I rapidly developed the real insider knowledge of how people run their systems. So like I do really understand how they calculate openings and how if there are any shenanigans going on during or after the sale, I do know about it because I had to write the program to handle it. And to that question, there really isn't anything going on behind the scenes, but I do understand the inner workings of these applications. So that's my insider background, but also I have the collector background, and in writing Stamp Auction Network, which was primarily for auction companies, in the last 5 years, we've really turned to focus on the needs of the collector and creating these additional features. We're not a competitor to the auction companies. There are some of our competitors back in the day were actually auction companies who sold their software to other auction companies, or had, like Philosearch actually is, that's auction company behind the scenes there. Or the other one, David Feldman had an auction management system and a website. So one of the things about us is that we are not actually an auction company, although we occasionally run some charity sales, but we're not that. So, and we are on the cutting edge. I mentioned my VC venture capitalist background. That is, I've returned to my entrepreneurial days, and I'm back in the startup ecosystem. And I do know about all these advancing technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, image recognition, blockchain, et cetera, and we're working now to bring those technologies to the philatelic world. And as I mentioned, I'm a collector, but not a competitor. So, I mean, I did make 2 pretty serious collections. I had a collection of US Columbians on cover. And then I did, for a number of years, I was doing the exporter collector. I was a Mexico exporter issue on cover, and that was something I love to do. But there I wasn't competing. There's like 5 or 6 of us in the whole world, so it wasn't like I had any insider information so I could win lots. I had bought most of my stuff on eBay. So this is Stamp Auction Network. What I'm trying to do is make it interactive, kind of go from one to the other, so it's a little more interesting. So it won't be total slideshow, it'll be interactive. So Stamp Auction Network is here. So we cover $400 million of stamp sales a year, and these are the auction companies we represent. They're listed here. Here's the North American auction companies. And yes, Canada and Mexico are in North America. I know a lot of Americans, US Americans, don't think so. I mean, we understand that Canada is, but not necessarily Mexico. Anyway, we've grouped all you guys and us guys together. And then this is the rest of the world: Australia, Germany, England, Europe. So what you have is access to all the auctions in the world via Stamp Auction Network. So we organize the site as a bunch of links. So under newly listed, We just posted an Italian sale from Philadelphia Fisher. So you can go in there, and we retain the design. See, my background was primarily started with the real need for auction companies was to create auction catalogs rapidly using database publishing techniques. So the catalogs, when we created Stamp Auction Network back in 1994, really followed the catalog presentation. So they're really like online catalogs with a bidding interface. And so they're not like some of the others where you have a database approach, which is easier to create in some respects, but it's not necessarily as friendly to the stamp collector, because I think stamp collectors are used to navigating a table of contents that's set up in country and catalog number order. These are 10 tips. And the first thing I do want to say is, like, fear not. Buying and selling at auction is the way to go. And this is a big tip to do not be afraid to get into the auction business. And here are the reasons why. It is really the wholesale market. You should understand that probably only 10% of active collectors participate in the auction market. The rest of them are really buying at shows or for dealers, and they're basically paying retail price. That's an important consideration. When you participate in auctions, you are bidding against other collectors, bidding and buying against other collectors, and bidding and buying against other dealers who most often either are buying material to put in their stock, at which they're going to mark up 2 or 3 times, or they have a buyer that they think is going to buy it, and they're still going to mark it up. So it is really the best way to buy stamps. Whether you're buying collection lots or whether you're buying individual lots, it's the wholesale market. That's the best way to understand it. You have access to the best selection, meaning across the world. You've got a worldwide access. You can buy stamps from auction companies in Europe, anywhere in the world. It's also the best way to sell. And again, it's if you buy bidding against other collectors and dealers, and then you go to sell, you want as much competition for your items as you can. Under the retail business model, if you sell your collection to a dealer, he's going to pay you half of what he thinks he can sell it for at the very most. So also the best place to sell. And, some of the other features that you have at Stamp Auction Network is you have immediate access to pricing history, auction descriptions. You can buy catalogs at steep discount from the catalog value. And even so, a lot of people would think, oh, that's all good, Tom, but what about these astronomical prices for, these stamps, these philatelic rarity stamps, or these condition rarity stamps that are going on? It's the same thing there. Even if a stamp is selling for its highest price paid ever, it's either being bought by a collector or it's being bought by a dealer who wants to sell it to a collector. So in all respects, it is really the best way to get to stamps. So let's give you some information on how to participate in auctions. And that's really what we're all about here today. So the first rule of bidding is to know what stamp is worth and to bid according to its value. And then the second is to bid according to what you're willing to pay. And it's as simple as that. Of course, that requires that you know what the stamp is worth and what you're willing to pay, but all the other theories fall apart. I do get some pushback from the idea of the data that we've provided people. And, for $50, you can get access to 3 million lots worth $2.5 billion. And they say, I don't need that. I just will pay what I need to pay to get the lot. And okay, but you may be able to pay quite a bit less, or at least know what you're paying with some history. I'm going to get into some bidding theory when I move on here. What you don't want to do, and what this rule of bidding is saying, is that know what it's worth, know what you're willing to pay. it's a wrong theory to believe that the market value of an item will be set by the other bidder. Okay. I think that's the most common fallacy in the area. You're assuming that you're going to pay an increment over the other guy, and you're kind of assuming that he's smarter than you in terms of what the lot's worth. And you're okay with that. I'm saying you shouldn't be okay with that. You should know what it's worth and what you're willing to pay, and don't depend on the market setting a price. But I'm going to go into a little bit more in that in detail myself. Here, what we have at Stamp Auction Network is Canada #1. So we have 422 records of a Canada #1 being sold, and they're all kinds of formats. So we'll have stamps on cover, mint, used, pairs, blocks. There's a pair. And this is a quick dive into what Stamp Auction Network offers. Here's pricing history in descending order by highest price paid for all the #1 Canadas. I've got all the #1 New Brunswicks here. Got all the #1s Nova Scotias, etc. And what you're seeing here, for instance, this stamp right here, this stamp on cover, it's a Nova Scotia #1, two on there with a, it's got a 5 cent as well. So this is the only recorded pence and cents mixed franking recorded from Nova Scotia, one of the most important cents period issues. And it goes and talks about the 1860 decimal issue of the American Banknote Company. So this stamp was printed by the American Banknote Company, put on sale October 1st. This stamp was carried on the Cunard Line, Canada, from Halifax to Boston. And, it says pence and cents mixed rate. Frankings are rare in Canadian philately. Now, the other thing that's going on here, so all these stamps are listed in the highest price paid for the #1s of Nova Scotia. And this looks like a very reasonable space to enter. This highest price paid for something here is $16,000. So I've got to imagine that there's lots of space to enjoy making a serious collection of some rarity without spending, a bazillion dollars. But what's interesting here that I point out is the way Stamp Auction Network works is that I have this recorded sale of this cover by Rumsey Auctions in 2016. And now here's where we use some of the new techniques. Stamp Auction Network is able to tie and create an online provenance. So while this stamp on cover sold at Rumsey's in 2016, it was also later reoffered in 2018 in another sale, 84, where it was sold again for $10,000. So this is extremely valuable. If this came on the market again, you would know that in 2016 it sold for $14,000. In 2018 it sold for $10,000. And it's the exact same cover. We use image recognition tools to match all these up. Tip number 2 is to bid according to its value, bid what you're willing to pay. And, a lot of times we do get people calling in after the sale saying like different things. And they're wondering why a lot sold for so much and so much. And they're saying, well, I bid a lot more than the opening, and then it sold for more than I thought it would. And that's not necessarily an indicator that the auction company ran you up, but we're going to talk about that more. It's best to know what it's worth and what you're willing to pay. Now, the next tip is when you're buying material at auction, you should consider the end in mind. By that, I mean, what's going to happen to your collection when you sell it, when your heirs sell it, or I really believe you should sell your collection while you can still enjoy watching it get sold and not leave it to your kids or leave it to someone else. But so typically, and the general rule here is when your collection gets sold, the auction company is going to take your lifetime accumulation, and they're going to go through it, and they're going to select items that they can sell as single lots. The rest of it is going to go into remainder lots and collection lots, etc. And that is how they can get the highest return on your auction cattle, on your collection, and do the best by you. So if your collection is going to be sold this way, you should buy it with the similar strategy in mind. So as much as you can, if you're starting out in an area, you should buy collection lots to buy all the inexpensive material. Don't buy lots that are going to get put in the remainder lot as an individual lot at auction. The other thing to consider is that when you do pay higher prices, so anywhere, $5,000 to $10,000 or more for stamps, there's a good chance if you have a decent collection that you can get discounts on the seller commission for some pricier items. So keep that in mind. And then the last tip is don't buy unsold stamps at a fraction of catalog value and expect to sell them for more. I do see that a lot of times. People buy stamps with faults, and they've got, I did see a collection, it had $100,000 of catalog value, and it didn't even get 2% of that because they just were space fillers. Let's see what there is in collection lots. Well, there's been a bunch of them, 20,000 collection lots in Canada. Let's see what there is there. I'm not sure if there's anything open right now, but we're going to just take a quick look. So if you did want to start a Newfoundland collection, here you go. Here's a $600 collection of Newfoundland. Paradise Valley selling it. And here's another one that looks like the more recent. These are the older. And there's a provinces collection that has a mix. Anyway, that's easily found. Then the other question are, which are the stamps that you should buy as single lots? And at Stamp Auction Network, we have something we call the Stamp Auction Network Top 1000. So what these are the top 200 United States stamps that are most often sold as single lots. These are not the C3A, the rarities. These are just rank and file stamps that are selling between $500 and $10,000. So let's look at Canada. So Canada. So these are stamps that you can't go wrong buying as an individual lot at Stamp Auction Network or at an auction company, because when you go to sell them, they will be lotted as an individual lot. And interestingly, at the top is your $5 Jubilee used, and then the $5 mint. And even at Stamp Auction Network, it tells you how many of these are available for purchase right now, and you can get right to the market history. So that's just, and the way I came up with these numbers is, it's a average of their highest price paid, their average price paid, their total market value, the supply and the demand, and maximum price rank. So basically what we're saying is these are stamps that have a pretty high value, but they also have a decent supply and a decent demand. So I would call these, the bread and butter, great stamps of a country that you would buy as single lots, and you're going to get your money back when you sell them. Tip 4, it should still be fun, right? So here's some lanes. Everyone's got you've got your people that want to fill out the catalog. They want to get all of Canada, all of a province, all of the United States. There's only a few people who can get the complete collection and all that, but that's a good aim. So the practical application is this: if you want to create a complete collection of a country, buy 3 collection lots, merge them all. That'll be a lot of fun. You'll get some collateral material. You might get catalogs and all kinds of extra stuff in there. The person's research, clippings from auction catalogs. Who knows what's going to be in there, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Then you merge that all into collection. Then you go find the missing pieces. That's fun. There are people that just accumulate stamps. They love to buy box lots. They buy, who knows? And I hear them say that, they're buying it now, and then when they retire, they'll fool around with it. Well, I would say, not word of wisdom, don't buy them thinking that someday you will come back to them. That may not happen. So if you're an accumulator, I wouldn't buy more than you can process at one time. Then there's the quality buyers. These guys may not fill a room full of stamps. Maybe they only have a file folder full, but they're all high quality. They're the least expensive rare stamp that they can afford on a budget. They're buying the best copy of a middle range rare stamp. And they don't necessarily care about, getting every stamp of a country. In my area, I specialized. So I specialized in the exporter issue uncover. I learned all about rates. I became one of a half a dozen experts in the exporter, and it's fun. So when you specialize, you will be able to recognize rarity where other people don't, and you can take advantage of that, buying stuff at much less than it might be worth. But remember, when you specialize, there may be only a half a dozen of you out there in the world, and the rest of the world may not share your passion for that specialized area. So it may not be as easy. Those bargains may not result in personal gain. On the topic of specialization, you'll develop expertise and recognize value. I did this with the exporter issue, like I said, and so I found that certain destinations were very rare, certain denominations, like the 5 centavo stamp was actually a hard one to find on cover. But I was able to sell my collection at about what I put into it. And I actually had 30,000 exporter covers, and I knew about all the rates, and I would collect all these crazy, difficult to find rates and foreign destinations. It was a lot of fun, and you could have people give you material because no one messed with it. These are 50-cent covers, but often you'd find a 50-cent cover that was worth $80, or in one case I found a $5,000 cover. But when you sell, that's the problem, because so my collection, I guess this is online, but I put together a collection. I sold it for $30,000. Unfortunately, the person that bought it died within a year, and the collection ended up for sale in Germany. And the auctioneer called me to ask me if I would put a bid on it, on my own collection. And so I did put like a reserve bid on it. It sold for about $5,000 because the folks 2 of the main collectors died within a year. So it's unfortunate and sad that we lost the knowledge of that area. But that's one thing you want to be considering. Okay, your bidding toolbox. So again, we're really talking about auctions. So I am going to talk as much as I have time about the main ways that you place bids. Absentee bidding is when you give your bid to the auction house before the auction. You can bid by phone during the auction. You can bid live, either by physically being there at the auction or live on StampAuctionNetwork or one of these other internet platforms. You can hire an agent to place your bids for you, and you can use StampAuctionNetwork agent bidding. And all these have strategies, and I've got a slide that I'm going to talk about. But what I'm talking about here are some of the toolboxes that you have. These are some of the special bidding methods. There's one called or bidding. And if you're not familiar with that, that gives you the ability where there are 2 or 3 or 4 lots that are essentially the same, and you want to place competitive bids on them, but you don't want to win all 3 of them. So, you could have in a catalog 3 different used number 1s, Nova Scotias or whatever, and you don't want to win them all. You just want one. So you could bid on each of them and tie them together with an or bid. And what happens is if you win any one of them, the auction company will delete your other bids. There's a similar process for limit bidding. And that is where you just use a dollar amount. So you can say, I only want to spend, $400. You put in $3,000 worth of bids, and you're not going to spend more than that. So these are a couple of tools that auction houses have developed over the years. These have been around for a long time to, encourage you to bid, to participate, and to limit your downside, or limit the spending of your pocketbook. Now, let me talk about one. There's something called up to and break tie bidding. So, or bidding and limited bidding don't have this issue, but up to and break tie bidding. This is where you place a bid for $100, and the auctioneer gives you the option to break the tie, meaning that if another person bids $100, you'll get it by bidding an increment more. So you'd bid 110 and break the tie. There's also something called up to bidding, which is where you say place a bid for $75 up to $100. Now, I just want you to understand how the auction companies actually manage this process, because they don't manage it on the fly. They're not looking at your bid with a break tie bid. They're not looking at your $100 break tie bid saying, oh, that's a break tie bid. If someone else's bid's 100, I'll bid 110 for them. They don't have time, and their systems don't allow for them to think about it like that. So what's actually happens is if you put in a break tie bid, it's just going to add an increment to it. So your $100 bid goes into the system as 110. Your up to bid from 75 to 150, it goes in as 150. So these are really kind of marketing. They're not gimmicks. They're real features. But sometimes people run into problems where they give an up to bid. They bid 70 to 150. And then there's a couple of things that can go wrong. One is the auctioneer might not actually see the 150 part, and they might just put your $70 bid in. And then, that's really the only problem. But they are just going to put your $150 bid in. And so it's up to you to believe that that you can trust the auctioneer with your absentee bid, and that he will execute it at an increment over the underbid, which gets into strategy, which I'm going to try to get to as fast as I can. But last thing on this is make sure the auction company accepts these kind of bids. Not all, or bidding and limit bidding is pretty routine, but there are some auction houses that don't do that. So at StampAuctionNetwork, if I were to enter a bid on a lot, so I would just jump into a sale. Let's see if I can place some bids. This is what it would look like. And no, that sale's already closed. So let me go to the Ron Leith auction. So here's the Ron Leith auction, and here's some Canada Queens. So if I looked at these stamps here, okay, I could bid, $25 and put this a letter A, and I could bid this $25 and put a letter A. And I'm not winning either of these lots, but I wouldn't win both. So I type in the amount that I want to bid, and I press the submit all bids on this button, and there they are. So there's my bids. I'll get one of these or the other. And in red tells me I'm not winning that lot. It's opening at $60. That's one of the benefits of StampAuctionNetwork, is it shows you where the lot, pre-auction, where the lot is currently selling for. All right. So again, I could do a max bid 45 here, 20 to 45, but I don't suggest that. Best thing to do is just type in the 45 here, because that's actually how it's going to be executed. So don't depend on the market. And that's what I'm getting to. Don't depend on the underbidder setting the price. Use tip number one. Know what the value of something is, know what you're willing to pay for it. All it takes is one undisciplined bidder to drive up the price of the lot. So if you're assuming the price is going to be set by the underbidder, and the underbidder has the same strategy, you're in trouble, right? Because you're both going to just bid the lot up thinking that you're getting the market value for it. And then when you go to sell your stamp and only the one of you is still left there, the price is going to be determined by that third bidder, which you didn't know what he was bidding. He probably was knowledgeable. And so the value of that lot was much less than you paid for it. So it's really important to know the value and what you're willing to pay. So that's when two buy bidders meet. Don't want to be there. Absentee bidding, that's the idea where you give the auctioneer your bid before the auction, and it goes on their bid book. And when they open the lot up, they use your bid to determine where the starting bid is going to be. So if on their book they have your bid for 200 and they have someone else's bid for 100, optimally, they would open that lot for 110 and try to get you the best price that you can for your $200 bid. That is the theory of how lots get opened in a public auction. Now, this falls apart in some respects because there's other constraints. The auctioneer wants to get the consignor the best value, and there's also a time constraint. So if the auctioneer knows that that lot has got a book bid of 200 and 100, and he knows the lot's going to sell for 500, he's not going to open it up at 110 and waste everyone's time getting to 200 and then it going to 500 and taking even longer. So a lot of times they'll open it at a couple of increments below the high bid, et cetera. So the long and the short of it is, it's best not to let the auction company know your hand. So basically I'm saying you really shouldn't give the auction house your bid ahead of the sale. There's one reason why I think it's valid to do it, but in generally, if the sale is going to be a live auction and you're going to have the ability to bid online, then it's best not to give the auctioneer your book bid. There are other ways to give them your book bid. You can use an agent, you can use StampAuctionNetwork agent services. But the reason is, suppose the auctioneer didn't have either that $200 or that $100 bid. They don't know where it's going to sell for. They have an idea that maybe it's a $500 stamp, but then maybe it's not. So sometimes they will open it for much lower than even the bids on the book that might have been there. So basically, that's the reason I would suggest that you don't give the absentee bid to the auction house. Now, there's one reason where I think that you could, and that is where you only want to pay $200 for it. You think it's going to sell for $200. You want to be the first one in. By all means, use absentee bidding. Give them your bid. If you're sure that it's going to sell for 200, then go ahead and get the benefit of the tie. But remember, 80% of stamps don't have really enough supply or demand to be an asset class, to have a real market. And also remember that most items do sell on the floor. So the book bids are not that significant. And also, guys, sniping is not a real thing in real auctions. It doesn't work like it works on eBay. It doesn't. All you do is annoy everyone. If you're bidding at the very last 5 seconds in an auction and trying to be clever, what happens is as soon as you bid your amount, they just leave it open to see who else will bid on it. So you're not helping yourself. You're just making people annoyed. Now, there's some sweet spots, I believe, that are just based on the price of the stamp. No other matters regard. So like the $500 to $1,000 stamp is a hard stamp to sell. And the reason it is because the collectors with lots of money and are building the $100,000 collections, they've already bought that $500 stamp a long time ago. The rest of the world, that's kind of out of their budget. So it's sort of the range between going from one zone to another is an area where just by the price of the stamp, you might consider putting your bid in for a little bit less. Odds are you can buy it for less. Now, the other area is the premium stamps. And I would say this space is like 1,000 to 25 or maybe 15,000. These are the condition rarity stamps. These are the top of the population charts. Really great stamps. It might have a catalog value of, $1,000, but selling for 5,000. They're selling for five or 10 times catalog values because they're the very best. Now, you might think like that's a space not to play because you say like, that's crazy. Who's paying that kind of money for those stamps? Well, remember, we're in the wholesale market. So who's buying those stamps? Either another collector or a dealer who's going to flip it. And by and large, it's at least odds are 50-50 that, even though that stamp is selling for 6 times catalog value, it's being bought by a dealer who's going to flip it and charge that collector another 25%. So it's still a safe place for you to play. The other thing is waiting for the end of the auction and trying to buy unsolds. Some auction houses do this, some don't. So you just need to know who does and doesn't. Some auction houses believe this is really counterproductive. If they give you the opportunity to buy unsolds after the sale, then you won't bid during the regular sales. But some do. Some will pass lots, and you will hear them announce from the floor. They'll say, contact us if you want to buy it. It didn't sell at the offering price. I kind of talked about this absentee bidding. I feel like I'm running out of time here. So I am going to recommend a few videos at our site. And let me show you. This is bidding strategy. And I really did kind of cover it already. But at Stamp Auction Network, we have, under the help button, we have help with the site, instructional videos, and webinars. And here you can actually get 2-minute videos on all of the basic stuff. We've got 25 videos there from 2 to 5 minutes that cover all of this kind of stuff. And then we actually have this presentation. So to the person that said I need to slow down, you'll have this video to slow down. But we've also recorded these 10 tips in short segments. But what I want to point to you here is Stamp Auction Network Unattended Live Bidding Explained. This explains this slide, which talks about why you shouldn't bid absentee, phone bidding, live bidding, and agent bidding. And lastly, I'll just say the benefit of our database is I would call it search and research. You can search across 400 million offerings every year for anything you're looking for and find it in an esoteric sale in England or Germany or an auction company in America or Canada that you don't work with. But the research is where you have essentially years and years, an entire library of auction catalogs at your fingertips. That's not just the pricing, but the auction descriptions. So that's really where I'd like to stop.
Thank you very, very much, Tom, for speaking, for coming to this and presenting to us, and it's very helpful, and I appreciate it, and we all appreciated it. So thank you again.
Love talking to the Canadians too. You guys are great. So glad to be.